After a 5-year relationship, my fiancée stood up during our engagement dinner, clinked her glass, and announced she was leaving me for my best friend, right in front of my parents, her family, and everyone who mattered. They laughed. I didn't. I just nodded, stood up, and walked out. That was 8 months ago. Today she showed up at my job crying in the lobby. Because now, she finally understands what I did. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who writes about their life online. But here I am, sitting in my car during lunch break, typing this out on my phone because I can't stomach the thought of going back inside just yet. The hum of the engine is the only thing keeping me grounded right now. 8 months. That's how long I've spent trying to piece my life back together. And just when I thought I was making progress, she shows up, tears streaming down her face like some kind of tragic heroine. Let me back up a bit. My name's Alex, and up until that engagement dinner, I thought I had my life figured out. I was a month away from marrying Emily, the woman I'd been with since college. My best friend Jake was going to be my best man. My parents were thrilled, already planning the kind of future grandparents dream about. Everything seemed perfect. But, as it turns out, perfection is just a veneer. Beneath it lay a mess of secrets and betrayals that I was too blind, or maybe just too trusting, to see. When Emily stood up at that dinner, the world as I knew it broke apart like a cheap piñata. Her words echoed in my ears long after I walked out. I remember the way my mom's face fell, the shock in my dad's eyes, the awkward shuffling of chairs as guests tried to process what had just happened. I spent the next few weeks in a haze, crashing at my brother's place while I tried to figure out what to do next. Matt, my older brother by 3 years, has always been the rock in our family. He didn't say much, just handed me a beer and let me crash on his couch until I was ready to face the world again. I was grateful for that silence, for the space to feel without having to explain. Eventually, I moved back to my apartment, the one Emily and I had shared. She'd taken her things, but her presence lingered in the empty spaces. A forgotten hairpin on the bathroom counter, a half-burned candle on the windowsill. I threw myself into work, hoping that burying my head in spreadsheets and client meetings would dull the ache. It worked, to an extent, but every so often I'd catch myself staring out the window, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Jake tried reaching out a few times. His messages went unread. I couldn't bring myself to face him, not after what he and Emily had done. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. We'd been friends since middle school, bonded over a shared love of comics and bad sci-fi movies. I trusted him with everything, and he'd repaid that trust by stealing the one person I thought I could count on. So when Emily showed up today, mascara streaked across her cheeks. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to tell her to leave and never come back. But another part, the part that still remembered the way she used to laugh at my stupid jokes, hesitated. She looked lost, like a child who'd wandered too far from home. I stood there, torn between anger and something that felt uncomfortably like pity. "Alex," she said, her voice cracking, "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to turn to." I wanted to ask her why she thought I'd care, why she thought I'd be her lifeline after everything that happened, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded, gestured for her to sit down. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the air thick with things unsaid. Finally, she spoke, her words tumbling out in a rush. Jake had left her. Apparently, the grass wasn't greener on the other side after all. She realized too late that what she'd thought was love was just infatuation. She wanted to come back, to try and fix what she'd broken. But I knew deep down that some things can't be mended. I'm not sure what I'll do next. Part of me wants to forgive her, to try and salvage the good memories from the wreckage. But another part of me, the part that's been slowly rebuilding, knows that moving on means letting go. I guess time will tell which side wins out in the end. For now, I'm just trying to breathe, to take things one day at a time, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner. I sat there in my car, the engine, still humming softly, trying to make sense of Emily's unexpected reappearance in my life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent months trying to forget the way she used to laugh, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she was genuinely happy. Now, here she was, asking for forgiveness, and I was the one who felt like a stranger in my own skin. The office building loomed in the distance, a stark reminder of the life I'd carved out post-Emily. I was supposed to be inside, answering emails and pretending everything was fine, but instead, I was parked in the lot, wrestling with ghosts of a past I thought I'd buried. "Alex?" Emily had said, her voice barely a whisper. I know I messed up. I know that, but I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. I wanted to believe her, to pretend that the last 8 months had been nothing more than a bad dream, but I couldn't. Shake the image of her standing at that engagement dinner, her hand entwined with Jake's, as if it had always belonged there. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of memories. Emily's apology was a balm, but it was also a knife, reopening. Wounds I'd painstakingly stitched shut. Did she really think a few tears and a heartfelt confession could undo the damage? Could erase the betrayal? The truth was, part of me wanted to forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine. I wanted to let go of the bitterness that had seeped into my bones, to find peace in the chaos she'd left behind. But another part of me, the part that had learned to stand on its own, wasn't ready to let her back in. I glanced at my phone, the screen lighting up with a message from my brother. Matt, you okay? It read, simple, direct. I appreciated that about him. He never pried, just offered his presence like a lighthouse in a storm. With a sigh, I typed back, yeah, just processing. She showed up today. His response was immediate. Want to talk about it? I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keys. Did I want to talk about it? Did I even know what to say? Before I could decide, another message popped up. This one from an unfamiliar number. Alex, it's Jake. Can we meet? I stared at the screen, the letters blurring together as my heart thudded in my chest. Jake. The name alone was a trigger, a reminder of everything I'd lost. He hadn't tried to contact me in months. Not since the initial flurry of unanswered texts and voicemails. So why now? I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew I wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I closed the message without replying, my mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. The air in the car felt stifling, oppressive. I needed to move, to escape the confines of my own thoughts. Without really thinking, I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, the road stretching out before me like a lifeline. As I drove, the cityscape blurred into a tapestry of gray and green, the familiar streets offering a strange kind of comfort. I found myself heading towards the park where Emily and I used to spend lazy Sundays, back when the world seemed full of promise. It was a place of memories, both cherished and painful, but I needed to confront them if I ever hoped to move forward. The park was quiet, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. I parked the car and walked towards the pond, the water glistening in the light. I stood there for a moment, letting the serenity wash over me, before sitting down on a bench. I closed my eyes, listening to the distant laughter of children playing, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity, a glimmer of understanding. Emily's return had stirred up emotions I thought I'd buried, but maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it was time to face the past, to confront the pain and let it go. I took a deep breath, the air cool and crisp, and opened my eyes. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep running from my feelings. Whether I chose to forgive Emily, to let her back into my life, was a decision only I could make. But for now, I'd take it one step at a time, one day at a time. As I sat there lost in thought, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jake. Please, Alex, it's important. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. What could be so important that he'd reach out now after all this time? I didn't have the answer, but I knew I couldn't ignore him forever. Maybe it was time to hear what he had to say, to finally close this chapter of my life. I stood up, the decision made. I'd meet Jake, hear him out, and then maybe I'd finally be able to move on. The decision to meet Jake felt like a weight lifted. And yet, as I drove to the cafe where we'd agreed to meet, a different kind of heaviness settled in my chest. The kind that comes with uncertainty and the fear of reopening old wounds. The cafe was one of those places we used to frequent back in college, a cozy little spot tucked away from the main street, with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh pastries lingering in the air. It felt like a lifetime ago. I parked a block away, needing the walk to gather my thoughts. The sidewalk was littered with fallen leaves, crunching under my feet as I made my way to the entrance. I paused at the door, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. Jake was already there, seated at a corner table, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. He looked different, older maybe, or just worn down by the weight of his own choices. It was hard to tell. I approached slowly, each step feeling like a mile. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," he replied, standing awkwardly before gesturing for me to sit. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, sliding into the seat opposite him. The silence stretched between us, a chasm filled with everything left unsaid. I studied him, trying to reconcile the person in front of me with the friend I once knew. His hair was longer, a little unkempt, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry, Alex," he began, his voice strained. "I know I have no right to ask you to be here, but I need to explain." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Explain what, Jake? That you and Emily fell in love? That you thought it was okay to betray me?" He winced, the guilt etched into his features. "I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I swear. It just did, and I know that doesn't make it right." "Then, why now?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Why reach out after all this time?" He hesitated, glancing down at his hands. "Because I'm leaving, Alex. I got a job offer in Seattle. I'm moving next week." The revelation hit me harder than I expected. Jake leaving. The idea of him being so far away felt like the final nail in the coffin of our friendship. "So this is goodbye?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Yeah," he said softly, "and I couldn't leave without trying to make things right. Or as right as they can be." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, as if a few words could mend the fractures in our relationship. But as I sat there looking at the man who had once been like a brother to me, I realized that maybe I needed this closure as much as he did. "Do you love her?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He looked up, meeting my gaze. "I thought I did, but now, I don't know. Everything's so messed up." I nodded, understanding more than I cared to admit. Love was a complicated beast, one that didn't always play by the rules. "And Emily? She's staying," he replied, his voice barely audible. "We're done." The words hung in the air, a bittersweet confirmation that the past 8 months hadn't been a fevered dream. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Jake," I said finally, the honesty cutting through the tension. "But I don't want to hate you either. It's too exhausting." He nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "I get it, and I'm sorry, Alex, for everything." We sat there for a while longer, sipping our coffees and talking about nothing in particular. It was strange, this tentative peace we'd found amidst the ruins of our friendship. But as I looked at Jake, I realized that maybe this was enough, a chance to let go, to move on with a little less baggage. Eventually we stood, the moment of parting upon us. Jake extended a hand, and after a brief hesitation I took it. His grip was firm, a silent acknowledgement of what we'd once shared. And what we'd lost. "Take care of yourself, Alex," he said, his voice steady. "You too," I replied, releasing his hand. As I watched him walk away, a sense of calm washed over me. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten. I turned to leave, ready to face whatever came next. My phone buzzed just as I reached the car. A message from Matt. "Mom wants you over for dinner tomorrow. Said she's making your favorite." I smiled, typing a quick response. Wouldn't miss it. Sliding into the driver's seat, I felt a strange sense of hope. Maybe this was the turning point I needed. A chance to rebuild, to start anew. As I drove away, the city lights flickering in the distance, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally ready to let go of the past and embrace whatever lay ahead. But as I turned onto my street, my phone buzzed again. A new message this time. From Emily. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my heart skipped a beat. It seemed the past wasn't quite done with me yet. As I sat in the car, staring at Emily's message, I felt an old, familiar tug in my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had when I first saw her across that crowded lecture hall in college. The same feeling that had kept me up nights, thinking about what our future might look like. But now, that feeling was tangled with something else. Anxiety, maybe, or just plain old fear. I knew I couldn't ignore her forever. Just like I couldn't ignore Jake. But facing her meant facing everything I'd tried so hard to leave behind. I sighed, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I typed a quick response. "Okay. Tomorrow?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Thank you. I'll come by your place." I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, trying to quell the rising tide of emotions. I needed a distraction, something to take my mind off the impending conversation. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine's rumble a welcome break from the silence. Driving aimlessly, I found myself heading toward the gym, a place I hadn't visited in months. It used to be my sanctuary, a place where I could drown out the world with the clanging of weights and the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the treadmill. I parked and walked inside, the familiar scent of rubber mats and sweat greeting me like an old friend. I changed quickly and headed to the free weights, hoping the physical exertion would clear my mind. As I lifted, I focused on the burn in my muscles, the steady rhythm of my breath. But no matter how hard I pushed myself, I couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in my head. Emily, Jake, the tangled web of our past still held me captive, a constant reminder of what once was and what could never be again. I wondered if I'd ever truly be free of it, or if I was doomed to carry these ghosts with me forever. After an hour, I gave up, my body exhausted, but my mind still racing. I headed to the locker room, splashing cold water on my face in a futile attempt to wash away the memories. As I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized the man looking back at me. He seemed older, wearier, like he'd lived 1,000 lifetimes since that fateful engagement dinner. I dried my face and headed out, the setting sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Matt. "Hey, you good? Want to come over for a beer?" I smiled, grateful for his unwavering support. I typed back, "Yeah, I'll be there in 20. The drive to Matt's place was short, and when I pulled up, he was already waiting on the porch, 2 beers in hand. He tossed one to me as I climbed the steps, and we settled into the worn-out chairs that had seen countless late-night conversations. "Thanks for coming," he said, taking a swig of his beer. "Mom's been asking about you. She's worried." Nodded, the familiar guilt creeping in. "I'll call her tomorrow. Just needed some time to think." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Emily?" "Yeah," I replied, the word heavy on my tongue. "She wants to talk." Matt didn't say anything, just took another sip of his beer. He knew when to push and when to let me be, a skill honed over years of brotherhood. We sat in comfortable silence, the crickets chirping in the background, the night air cool against my skin. I stared out at the yard, the shadows of trees swaying gently in the breeze, and felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. "I met with Jake today," I said finally, breaking the silence. "He's moving to Seattle." Matt raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel about that?" I shrugged, unsure of the answer myself. "Relieved, I guess. Sad, too. It's complicated. Life usually is," he replied with a small smile. "But you're handling it better than most would." I appreciated the vote of confidence, even if I didn't entirely believe it myself. We talked about other things after that. Work, the latest movies, anything to avoid the elephant in the room. But eventually, the conversation circled back. "Do you think you'll forgive her?" Matt asked, his tone gentle but probing. "I don't know," I admitted, the truth of it settling in my chest like a stone. "I want to, but it's hard. Part of me still loves her, but another part just can't." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Whatever you decide, just make sure it's for you, not for her." I nodded, grateful for his wisdom. "Thanks, Matt. I mean it." We sat there a while longer, the stars twinkling overhead, the world quiet around us. It was a moment of peace, a brief respite from the chaos of my thoughts. Eventually, I stood, stretching the stiffness from my limbs. "I should get going. Need to get some sleep before tomorrow." Matt nodded, standing to walk me to my car. "Call me if you need anything, okay?" "Will do," I replied, clapping him on the shoulder. "Thanks for everything." As I drove home, the streets were deserted, the world asleep. I felt a strange sense of anticipation, a mix of dread and hope swirling in my gut. Tomorrow would bring answers, one way or another. When I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion tugged at my eyelids, but sleep eluded me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thoughts of Emily and Jake dancing in my mind. I wondered what she would say, what I would say, and whether this conversation would finally give me the closure I so desperately needed. As I drifted on the edge of consciousness, a single thought anchored me. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was ready to face it, ready to confront the past and, hopefully, find a way to let it go. And with that, I finally slipped into a restless sleep, dreams of laughter and betrayal swirling in the darkness. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across my bedroom floor. I lay there, blinking at the ceiling, trying to piece together the fragments of restless dreams. Conversations with Emily and Jake echoed in my mind, their voices mingling with my own insecurities. Today was the day I would face Emily and maybe find a sliver of peace. I dragged myself out of bed, the weight of anticipation heavy on my shoulders. The apartment was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic outside. I made my way to the kitchen, the routine of brewing coffee grounding me in the present. As the rich aroma filled the air, I tried to focus on the simple act of pouring a cup, hoping it would steady my racing thoughts. The knock on the door came. Sooner than expected, a sharp reminder of the conversation I couldn't avoid any longer. I set the mug down, my hand trembling slightly as I wiped it on my jeans. With a deep breath, I opened the door. Emily stood there, her eyes searching mine. She looked different, older somehow, like she'd been carrying her own burdens. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore a simple sweater that seemed to hang a bit too loose on her frame. "Hi," she said softly, her voice a tentative whisper. Her words were a stark contrast to the persistent emails I had been receiving from her, filled with regret and pleas for a chance to talk. "Hi," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. She moved past me, her presence both familiar and foreign, like a song I hadn't heard in years but still knew by heart. We settled in the living room, the silence stretching between us like a fragile thread. I watched her as she glanced around, her eyes lingering on the empty spaces that once held her things. It was strange, seeing her here again, in the place we'd shared so many memories. "Thanks for agreeing to see me," she said, breaking the silence. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap, a gesture I remembered all too well. "I figured we needed to talk," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a long time." She nodded, her eyes meeting mine. "I know I hurt you, Alex, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Her words were sincere, but they couldn't erase the past. I looked away, focusing on a spot on the carpet. "Why now, Emily? Why come back after all this time?" She took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to her hands. "Because I realized I made a mistake. I thought I wanted something different, but I was wrong. I've spent months trying to figure out how to fix what I broke." I let her words sink in, the weight of them pressing down on me. "And Jake?" I asked, needing to hear it from her. "We're done," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "He's moving to Seattle next week. It's over." I nodded, the confirmation both a relief and a reminder of the tangled mess we'd all found ourselves in. "I met with him yesterday," I admitted, watching her reaction. She looked surprised, a flicker of something, hope maybe, crossing her face. And we talked. He apologized, said he didn't want to leave without trying to make things right. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I'm trying to move on, Emily, but it's hard." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me, not right away, but I had to try." For a moment, we sat in silence, the only sound the distant hum of the refrigerator. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, the unspoken plea for understanding. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to carry this anger anymore. It's exhausting." She wiped her eyes, a small, hopeful smile tugging at her lips. "That's all I can ask for." We talked for a while longer, the conversation shifting from the past to the present. It felt strange, talking about mundane things like work and mutual friends, but it was a start, a tentative step towards something resembling closure. Eventually, she stood to leave, the moment of parting upon us. "Thank you, Alex," she said, her voice sincere, "for giving me a chance to explain." I nodded, walking her to the door. "Take care of yourself, Emily. You too," she replied, hesitating for a moment before stepping out into the hallway. I watched her go, the door closing softly behind her. For a long time, I stood there, the silence of the apartment wrapping around me. The conversation had been difficult, but necessary. It was a step towards healing, towards letting go of the past. As I turned back to the living room, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up, a new message lighting up the screen. It was from Matt. "Mom's making lasagna. You in?" I smiled, the familiar warmth of family a welcome balm to my frayed nerves. I typed back a quick response, "Wouldn't miss it." As I set the phone down, a sense of calm settled over me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could see a path forward, a chance to rebuild, to start anew. But as I moved to the kitchen, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Jake's number. "Hey, Alex, I've been thinking about our talk. Can we meet again?" I stared at the message, my heart skipping a beat. It seemed the past wasn't quite done with me yet. I stared at Jake's message on my phone, the words blurring as I tried to process what he could possibly want to discuss. We'd already had our closure, or at least as much closure as two people could have after such a betrayal. Yet here he was, reaching out again. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But the nagging curiosity, the need to know why, wouldn't let me. The room felt too quiet, the ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly too loud. I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. It was as if the universe was determined to keep dredging up the past just when I thought I'd finally found a way to move forward. I thought about Emily and our conversation the day before. It had been difficult, but it felt like a necessary step, a way to unburden myself from the anger that had been my constant companion these past months. I'd expected to feel lighter, afterwards, but instead I just felt empty, like I'd been holding on to something for so long that I didn't quite know how to let it go. And now Jake wanted to meet again. I couldn't help but wonder if this was another step I needed to take, another piece of the puzzle I had to fit into place before I could truly move on. I picked up my phone again, my fingers hovering over the screen. Finally, with a sigh, I typed a short response. Okay. When and where? His reply was immediate. Coffee shop by the park? Tomorrow at 10? I agreed, feeling a strange mix of dread and anticipation settle in my stomach. It was the same cafe where we'd met the day before, where so much had been left unsaid. I wondered what new revelations awaited me this time. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to focus on work, on anything that could distract me from the swirl of emotions in my head. But no matter how hard I tried, my thoughts kept circling back to Jake, to Emily, to the tangled web of our past. That evening, I found myself at Matt's place again, seeking the comfort of his steady presence. He didn't ask about the message, didn't pry into my thoughts. Instead, we watched an old movie, the kind we used to love as kids, and for a few hours, I was able to lose myself in the familiar lines and predictable plot twists. But as I drove home, the weight of the upcoming conversation settled back over me. I knew I wouldn't sleep much that night, my mind too busy conjuring scenarios of what Jake might say, what he might want. Morning came all too quickly. The sun, streaming through the blinds as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I got up and went through the motions of getting ready, the routine grounding me in the present. By the time I left the apartment, I felt a little more prepared, a little more ready to face whatever awaited me. The cafe was quiet when I arrived, the morning rush having already come and gone. I ordered a coffee and found a seat by the window, the view of the park offering a momentary distraction. I watched as people passed by, their lives seemingly uncomplicated, untouched by the kind of drama that had unfolded in mine. Jake arrived a few minutes later, his expression unreadable as he spotted me and made his way over. We exchanged a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of the tension between us. He sat down, and for a moment neither of us spoke, the silence stretching like a taut wire. "Thanks for meeting me," he said finally, his voice low, careful. "I'm not sure why we're here again," I replied honestly, taking a sip of my coffee. "I thought we'd said everything yesterday." He nodded, looking down at his hands. "I know, but there's something else I need to tell you." I waited, the anticipation gnawing at me. "Okay, go on." He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine. "I didn't just come to apologize yesterday. I wanted to tell you about Seattle because, well, I wanted to give you this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table. I stared at it, confused. "What is this?" "It's a letter," he said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his nerves. "From Emily. She wrote it after everything happened, but she never sent it. I found it when I was packing and I think you should read it." I hesitated, my mind racing. A letter from Emily, written in the aftermath of our engagement dinner. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it contained, wasn't sure I wanted to reopen those wounds. But something in Jake's expression told me it was important. I picked up the envelope, turning it over in my hands. "Why didn't she send it?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe she was scared. Maybe she thought it wouldn't make a difference, but I think she wanted you to have it." I nodded, slipping the envelope into my jacket pocket. "Okay, I'll read it." We sat in silence for a while longer, neither of us quite sure how to end this unexpected meeting. Finally, Jake stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "I hope it helps," he said, his voice sincere. "I really do." "Thanks, Jake," I replied, meaning it more than I expected. "Safe travels to Seattle." He nodded, a small, sad smile on his lips. "Take care, Alex." As he left, I felt a strange sense of closure settling over me. Whatever the letter contained, it felt like the final piece of the puzzle, the last thing I needed to confront before I could truly let go. I sat there for a while, the envelope a weight in my pocket, before finally standing and heading home. As I walked, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, a quiet certainty that whatever happened next, I was ready to face it. Back at my apartment, I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter in front of me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever truths it might hold, and carefully opened the envelope. As I unfolded the paper, Emily's familiar handwriting greeted me, the words, "A bridge to the past." I began to read, my heart pounding in my chest, knowing that this was the moment that would finally set me free. The letter lay on the table, its presence almost mocking me with its simplicity. Just a piece of paper, yet it carried the weight of everything that had happened. I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, and slowly unfolded it. Emily's handwriting was familiar, each loop and curve a reminder of the person I'd once loved. "Alex," it began, her words a bridge to a time I wasn't sure I wanted to revisit. "I don't know how to start this, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I've replayed that night over and over in my mind, wishing I could take it all back, wishing I could have seen the hurt I was causing before it was too late." I paused, my heart heavy with the weight of her regret. It was strange reading her words, knowing she'd written them in the aftermath of our world falling apart. I continued, each sentence a step further into the past. "I was selfish, Alex. I thought I was doing what was right for me, but I didn't see how wrong it was for us. He was a mistake. I see that now. I was looking for something, but I didn't realize I already had it with you." Her admission was like a balm and a wound all at once. I'd spent months trying to understand why, trying to piece together the fragments of our relationship, and here it was, laid bare in her handwriting. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I've lost that right, but I hope one day you can find it in your heart to remember the good times we had. I hope you can find happiness, even if it's not with me." I set the letter down, my hands trembling slightly. It was everything I'd needed to hear and nothing I'd wanted to know. Her words were sincere, but they couldn't change the past. They couldn't erase the betrayal or the months of pain that had followed. And yet, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. Maybe it was the finality of it, the knowledge that I'd heard her side, that I'd confronted the ghosts of our past. Maybe it was the realization that I didn't have to carry this anger anymore, that I could choose to let it go. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. The apartment was quiet. The only sound, the distant hum of traffic outside. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly drain from my body. It was over. The chapter that had consumed my life for so long was finally coming to a close. I'd faced Jake, I'd faced Emily, and now I was facing myself. The person I'd become in the wake of it all. The person who was stronger, wiser, and maybe a little more cautious. I stood, folding the letter carefully and placing it back in the envelope. It was a part of my story now, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come, but it didn't define me. Not anymore. As I moved to the window, I watched the world outside, the city alive with the hustle and bustle of everyday life, people going about their days, unaware of the personal battles being fought behind closed doors. I felt a connection to them, a shared understanding of the struggles and triumphs that made us human. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A message from Matt. "Dinner's at 6. Don't be late." I smiled, the warmth of family a comforting presence in my life. I typed back a quick response. "I'll be there," as I set the phone down. I felt a sense of anticipation for the future. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. Ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength to handle it. I took one last look at the letter, a final goodbye to the past, before heading out the door. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city, and as I walked, I felt a lightness in my step, a newfound freedom in my heart. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to shape. Whatever it held, I knew I was ready to live, to love, and to find my own path forward. And as I made my way to Matt's, I felt a quiet certainty that everything was going to be okay.